And do you not think it's mad that they made a farmer the farming minister?
I think that's quite useful.
The agriculture minister.
So I went up to the house and George and I were sitting there and he says, do you know that I was going to sack you? I said, what? He said, I was going to sack you. I said, what for? He said, you were useless.
I feel like even the trend around veganism and things has died down a bit.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that was like a sort of fashion thing for a while, but I think that...
Yeah, well, most of them are back on meat now. They realised how crazy that was. Like, that's how that is.
Animax.
I've been Cammy.
I've been Iona.
And we are both
Fed by Farmers.
Hello and welcome to the Fed by Farmers podcast with me, Cammy Wilson.
And me, Iona Murray.
Barely gave Iona time to sit down there before we started. Such is our rush to get going with this one. Do the thank yous first.
Thank you to Crystalyx and Tracesure by Animax.
Yeah, thanks to both of them. I have been flat out bolusing.
Yeah, you have
this
big
week.
bolusing jobs.
Yes, bolusing before I go to America. In fact, as this podcast comes out, I will be in the United States of America, in Michigan.
Wow.
So whenever I think of Michigan, I think of that really funny video. Have you seen it where the guy's playing that game Heads Up on your phone? So it's like charades or something. Basically, a word comes up, you hold the phone above your head, and a word comes up, and the person playing the game has to describe it to you without saying that word.
Aye.
And in the video, I'm just laughing thinking about it. In the video, it says Michigan, and the Scottish guy goes, "Pulls rabbits out of a hat and all that." And the guy goes, "Magician." Aye, that's it. And he goes, "That's no magician." His mate goes, "That's no magician." That's so funny. So whenever I hear Michigan, I think of that. So that's where I'll be at the North American Hill Sheep Show. Very excited. Myself, Alan Blackwood, Gareth Wynne-Jones, and a few other hill sheep specialists are going there.
Excited?
I'm not a hill sheep specialist, but
what will you be like there? I can't picture you in America.
yeah, but pretty similar. Just
Do you think?
Yeah, maybe clean clothes on. Pretty similar. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's sunny or... It's similar latitude as us, so it'll be similar weather, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Be fine. We'll enjoy it.
We'll need to do a podcast when you're back, a catch-up.
Oh, definitely. And we'll maybe try and record one or two while we're there. Sorry to say, you'll miss those
Yeah,
ones.
no, these it seems to be becoming quite a theme.
Don't overthink it. Should we discuss who we are interviewing this week?
Yes, we definitely should.
That is the purpose of this. We are interviewing Mr. Jim Fairlie. Does he have letters? MSP.
MSP.
Mr. James Fairlie MSP.
Jim?
Just Jim, is it? I was trying to be all formal.
Oh, right.
It is Jim Fairlie. So he is the Minister for, you forgot, Agriculture.
And connectivity.
Yeah, and connectivity. It's a weird combo, but Jim explains a bit about what that actually means. In the podcast, should we get going? Should I caveat a couple of things first and say...
Go for it.
Although Jim is an MSP, which is a member of Scottish Parliament, I should say, and we should clarify he is the Minister for Agriculture and Connectivity for Scotland. Yes.
No, a specific council, is it not?
No, for Scotland.
Oh, is it? What
The
was
whole
it?
of Scotland.
What council does he cover, though?
Well, no, it's not a council, it's his constituency.
Right, and what does that mean?
Like your constituency is the area. So, for example, Kilmarnock and Loudon was a constituency here for Westminster election. Your constituency is your area that you represent.
But then you're saying it's for the whole of Scotland?
Yeah, but he has a cabinet position, which is, although you are a minister for a certain area, you get national roles. Like John Swinney is he's a representative of, I think it's Fife, but he's the first minister for the whole of Scotland.
Right, with you. Two separate roles.
So it's actually Fife that votes him in.
Okay.
But he then represents the whole of Scotland.
Okay.
He's then in charge of the whole of Scotland.
Right.
Same with all of them, like Keir Starmer. Like if he lost his, as much as he was the leader of the Labour Party, like he'd been he'd have to resign basically if he didn't get voted in his constituency.
Okay.
You know, it'd be untenable. It's a word I really like.
Can I also say something like I don't know if it comes across, I'm not really into politics. But what I would say with Jim, it's not like boring politician. Like I feel like because he's a farmer and he's got there's...
Are you suggesting politicians are boring?
For somebody who's ignorant like myself, who doesn't really understand it all, then yes.
Okay.
But
do you think Boris Johnson's boring?
No, I feel like he's got quite a lot of stories about him.
He's got a lot of stories. If only we knew the half of them. No, I agree. It's not very politics heavy.
No, that's what I
We don't
mean.
give Jim a hard time because that's not what we're about at all.
Yeah, he challenged him on some things though.
Yeah, but like I like Jim. I like and
It's more about his farming and his background and.
it's just a podcast.
Yeah, no, I don't. Why relax? Why make such a big deal about
It's
it?
just a bit of crack.
No, calm down.
I've not voted before. That upsets a lot of people. So there's no there's maybe slight bias because I'm pro Scotland. But have you voted?
Just in the independence.
Oh, we said that. Yeah, okay. So we both voted. Oh, is that right? We've only both voted in that
So
time.
bad, isn't
That's
it?
terrible. It's actually shocking.
But you should vote because you're actually knowledgeable on it. I'm not.
But the reason I don't vote is I would argue is because I look at it and I say I don't like it.
Nobody.
Yeah, I don't like it. And folks say, "I'll go and spoil your ballot." But, who's got time to do that?
Exactly.
It's like, what do you think I'm trying? I've got time to go down, stand in a queue to scribble on a bit of paper saying, I don't like these guys. No,
not gonna do
I'm just not doing it. Anyway, enough waffling. Let's do the podcast and we'll chat about it at the end. Here we go. And we're here with Mr. Jim Fairlie MSP of Perthshire South and Kinrossshire.
That's correct.
I just asked that off camera because it's a mouthful to remember. Who's Perthshire North?
That's John Swinney, First Minister.
That's it. Okay.
Yes.
Big neighbour.
Big neighbour, yeah.
Aye.
Pete Wishart he's the constituency MP, so he's our Perthshire is a real sort of stronghold. It's deeply rooted in our area. That's
Deeply for SNP?
yeah.
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah.
We're SNP down here, I think. Well, it went Labour in the last election. It was
Yeah,
like,
that,
but then
for the UK Parliament, yeah.
yeah, for the general, but we're SNP for a lot. I'm just trying to think who the actual MSP is for Comat. That's absolutely shocking. It's
I
just
don't
went out of
know.
my head. Terrible. It'll come back to me, I'm sure. So thanks very much for coming in. You're the first politician we've had in.
Am I?
Yeah,
All right,
I sent
okay.
Big Keir a message, but he's not got back to me.
Busy.
I thought, if new in the job, come up and tell us what you're all about. But yeah, he's obviously got a lot in his mind. Maybe easier to get Richie these days. Or Rishi, so that these days.
Yes. Well, I tell you, Scottish Government, we could never get hold of Rishi or any other of these officials, so it'll be nice to see if we're going to have a change in tone from the new UK government.
Yeah, it certainly seemed that when Keir first came in, I think he made a contact with John Swinney quite quickly,
Aye.
just to try and get rid of that nonsense that was
Yes.
going on before of
Yes.
we're not speaking to you and
Yeah.
it caused a bit of issues.
We'll do stuff and you'll just have to comply.
Yeah. But we'll talk a wee bit of politics, of course we have to, because you're here, but tell us what your actual role is, first of all, I suppose.
Well, I'm the MSP for Perth South and Kinrossshire, as you said, and the role of MSP is just basically represent your constituency, raise issues on people's behalf, and just what the normal role of an MSP is. But I'm also the Minister for Agriculture and Connectivity. And there's a bit of confusion about connectivity, because everybody thinks it's digital, but it's not. It's physical transport. So
Right, I always thought it was the boats.
ferries, yes.
Yeah, so I thought you were like the scapegoat.
No. Do you know the thing is, there are definitely issues that we've got to deal with the ferry situation in Scotland. There's no doubt about it. It's got an ageing fleet, but there's been a huge amount of investment going into it. We've got 2 new ferries that are sitting, and I get that there has been problems with the construction of these ferries, but we're getting to the end of that process. The electric ferries are going out to tender, and we've got 4 new ferries getting built in Turkey right now. So we're going to dramatically reduce the age of the stock, the working stock that's there, over a short period of time. CalMac themselves, I just did a tour last week, went to Mull and Isla. And the folk there, the staff on CalMac are absolutely brilliant. Mm-hmm. Now, there are some issues that are going to have to be dealt with, but Fiona Hislop, the Transport Secretary, is all over it. So my role will be to, as we get those new ferries in place, then it'll be just to make sure they continue to run, whereas Miss Hislop is taking on the big stuff, and she's very, very effective at it.
Yeah, it has just become this such a hot topic, I suppose, because it's like you say, it's going to be changed, and not that I'm going down this big journalist route of picking out points, because like this is very laid back and more about getting to know you and having a bit of crack, really, but you say it's going to happen in a very quick time. Obviously, the big issue is how long it's actually taken to get. It's going to quickly happen now when they're all here.
Yeah.
But it's the whole shambles. It's quite a shame to see that it was a Scottish business behind a lot of the problems as well. I think that's what's upset a lot of folk.
Yeah, no, and that, we just have to accept that. Mm-hmm. But the thing, I tell you, you run a business, you have both come from business background. Guarantee you've made mistakes.
Yeah,
Guarantee.
but like you guys, we
Well, exactly.
We get most of our stuff made in Turkey now.
Yeah, well,
Turkey. A lot of our clothing actually comes from Turkey because they're bloody good at it.
yeah,
Like
well,
you know,
they make good fairies as well. apparently, so.
ideal.
I think that's what's a shame for like politicians and things is it's almost like the public don't accept that you make mistakes.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah, but then it's to switch it the other way. It's like the role you're in, you can't be making mistakes. It's like
But
you wouldn't
people-
accept a CEO making mistakes; they'd be out the door. You'd blame a CEO if there was several millions of pounds over budget on a project. So someone has to get the blame. But I don't
Yeah.
think you guys, and it's obviously it's not on you. It's way before you were in your role, but like I think generally speaking, you guys accept that. Like you don't try and shy away from the fact that someone's got to get the blame for it, but you've got to explain the situation as well.
Yeah, well, there's the commentary that goes with it. There's the communication that goes with it, and it's just part of the job. You know, we sign up to it. You know, I made a decision to stand to be an MSP. I accepted the job of going into government. So you know, we take the criticism. If it's justified criticism, we'll absolutely take it, and that's fair. But I generally try to push back when I think it's unjustified. So. So we're taking this one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But and do you not think it's mad that they made a farmer the farming minister,
I think that's quite useful.
the agriculture minister? Do you think it's unheard of? I think it's great. I think
so
it's
good.
great, and
Yeah, I think
it's
it's quite
actually like
useful.
a big feather in the cap, I would say, for SNP that they've done that. But it's like you know they don't usually put like an ex NHS boss in charge of health.
Yeah.
You know, it always seems to be some random person with a strange background, whereas your actual farmer.
I think that's probably one of the reasons that I got selected by the local party to stand to be the candidate was that you know the SNP was all about governing for the whole of Scotland, and we did have strong rural support and background, and I wanted to make sure that continued when I decided to get involved in politics. And I was sitting in the back benches for a couple of years, and I don't think that we can deny, the party lost its way in that to a certain extent. It did become quite central belt orientated, but that changed when Hamza Yusuf became First Minister. He came in and he was looking at areas thinking, okay, how are we going to fix stuff? And he made a very conscious decision. He made that point when he asked me to join the government. He says, we have lost a certain amount of that connection. He says, and part of the role for you coming in is to regain that so that people understand that the party is and always has been about governing for the whole of Scotland. And then when Hamza stood down and John Swinney took over, he made exactly the same point. That role is crucial. That the connection between Scottish Government and rural Scotland has to absolutely be there because we govern for the whole of the country.
Yeah, I think Hamza set up a good platform for John Swinney coming in with the rural community because he sort of threw himself under the bus by getting rid of the Greens, I suppose, but that definitely won him a lot of favour with the farming community.
Yes, it did. There's no denying that.
I mean, you're talking about the SNP losing its way a bit. I imagined you had the G word in your head.
The tension was undoubtedly there. Now, don't get me wrong, there were very, very good reasons for Scottish Government doing what they did in terms of having that cooperation agreement. And even some of the policies that were bringing forward were SNP policies, but it became the narrative that it was the green tail wagging the yellow dog. Whether that was true or not doesn't matter. In politics, the narrative starts to become the story.
Yep.
And that was part of the problem. Now, we have got issues around climate change. We've got issues around biodiversity loss. All of those things are happening. And the Greens absolutely want to highlight that, and justifiably so. And the Scottish Government have got the same desire to make sure we're tackling those issues. So we will continue to drive the biodiversity loss. We'll continue to drive the getting emissions down. We're going to continue to do those things. But I hope one of the things that the farming community particularly take out of the fact that I'm in post is that we'll try and do it in a way that is practical and workable and gets us to a place where everybody can say, not very happy about it, but I know why we're doing it, and we can get on board. So it's a wee bit like, when we brought forward the Wildlife and Urban Management Bill, it became very polarised very quickly. And It didn't need to be. It needed to be brought back into the centre. And that's one of the things I'm going to try to do in my role, is make sure that we have, sensible conversations about what it is that we're trying to do. And everybody has to accept things are changing. There's no way that business as usual is going to carry on. Things are definitely going to change. And one of the good things about going into government is you suddenly get a rack of information in front of you. You think, right, okay, there's real need for us to do this. There's value in doing that. And therefore, I then have the job of trying to translate that into a conversation with the community.
Reduce the risk of fly strike and livestock irritation at grass with Crystalyx garlics. Flies and midges are a constant pest to livestock throughout the summer and are responsible for diseases such as summer mastitis, pink eye, blue tongue and Schmallenberg. No repellent is 100% effective in the fight against airborne biting insects. However, Crystalyx garlics can play an important part in reducing the number of flies that land on livestock. Containing concentrated garlic extract, 5 times more potent than pure dried garlic, Crystalyx garlics offers a natural defence to biting insects, with the high sulphur compounds in garlic acting as a natural insect repellent. With a full complement of vitamins, minerals and trace elements, Crystalyx garlics balances the known deficiencies in forage while stimulating the rumen for enhanced animal performance. Make the switch this summer to research-proven Crystalyx garlics.
I think it'd be good to come back to the politics, but I would love to hear a bit more about how you got to where you are now and your background, and because you're not from farming background, are you?
No. I was absolutely born and bred a townie. I was brought up in a very working class housing estate in Latham in Perth. I was one of 5 kids. We lived in a 3-bedroom house. In fact, when I was born, no long after I was born, Dad went off to be a student. I was the 4th child of 5, and Dad went back to college and then university.
What to study?
Economics, history, and modern studies, I think it was. Right. But my dad's got a memory like a small machine.
Yeah.
He was working in construction. He was a driver. He was a bus driver. He did various things. We always knew he needed to go back and do the academic stuff. So he decided to do that after I was born, which meant they had, they didn't have student fees at that point, but they certainly had a student lifestyle and income in terms of, he was studying full time as well as trying to drive buses during the holidays, working shifts at night. Mum had a part-time job as well, so it was pretty tight.
Yeah.
We weren't affluent, let's put it that way. But in all my childhood, as I grew up, all I wanted to do was work with animals. Really? It was just my entire focus. All of my childhood was about animals. Now, it could have been insects in the garden. I got one of these wee trays, wee white plastic tray that Mum and Dad bought me a present for my 7th birthday, I think it was. It was like the Nature Finder or something like that. And it had a wee magnifying glass and a plastic microscope that didn't actually work. And these wee specimen racks with wee plastic boxes in them and tweezers to pick up certain bugs that you could categorise and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So it was just nature. I just loved nature. And as we were going through school, I spent my entire time looking at the window. I was not an academic in any way, shape or form. I stayed on until 6th year. That's because I didn't have a clue what I was going to do in my life. And as I was leaving school, I thought, right, okay, I need to work with animals. How am I going to do that? So I wrote to vets, I wrote to zoos, I wrote to gamekeepers, estates, farmers. I wrote anything that I could get a kind of an inroad to working with animals. And I got 2 responses. One was from a vet to say I should go study to be a veterinary nurse. And that meant going back to college in a classroom. That wasn't happening. Any advice from the school was, well, you need to be a vet, but you need to get far better grades than you've got, so forget it, go and be a Sparky. And the other letter that I got back was from a guy who said, we have got no jobs at the moment, but we'll keep your name on record. And I went back to thinking, what now? And then I was at home, lying in bed, I have to say, at 11 o'clock in the morning, at my study leave. And the phone went. And I picked up the phone and the boy said, can I speak to Jim Fairlie, please? And I said, junior or senior? And he said, it's George Sinclair here. I'm looking for a lad that wrote to me for a job. Is that you? And I said, yeah, that's me. And he said, so are you in relation to Jimmy Fairlie the cattleman? And I said, I don't know. He says, what's your dad's name? And I said, he's Jim Fairlie. And he says, what's his dad's name? And he says, that's Andy Fairlie. He says, right, that means that you're Jimmy Fairlie's great nephew then. I said, am I? He said, aye. I said, right. He said, so come up and see me at the weekend. So Dad came home from work that night and I said, you got an Uncle Jimmy who was a cattleman? He said, I used to work for a boy, George Sinclair, just on the other side of Perth. And when his dad died, my Uncle Jimmy took over the running of the farm because he was too young. He was only 18. He says, and he ran the farm until George was old enough to take it on. He says, why? I says, because I'm going to see him about a job at the weekend. Dad says, there's no money in it, son. Didn't matter. So I went up to see George, and he was a great big guy. Any of your listeners that are listening who are my generation or older, they'll remember George Sinclair. He was one of the biggest livestock dealers in the country. He wasn't really a farmer, he was a dealer. And I walked into his office, and he had this kind of old-fashioned real, there was a safe that was one of these, you had to turn the thing and the great big handle on it. It was all embossed. And a great big easy chair that he sat in. He must have been about 6'3", and you had the moleskin trousers, the tweed jacket, the check shirt. He had the leather cuffs on here and the brogues, and he sat there and his feet were bouncing the whole time. He had ice blue eyes. I remember that about him. And his wee glasses, and he used to peer at the top of the rim with his glasses. He said, you're Jimmy Fairlie? I says, aye. No, I was a rake of a laddie. I was literally just a skinny wee urchin of a laddie. And he says, so, did you know your Uncle Jimmy? I says, no, never met him. Oh, well, so he gave me the history of my Uncle Jimmy, or my dad's Uncle Jimmy. Great man. And he says, and you interested in working with livestock? I says, aye, I am. You ever work with sheep? I said, well, I go to the market on a Monday on holidays and I take my dog with me and we chase the sheep up. So I was droving at the local market in Perth. He says, you ever work with cattle? No. But I keep racing pigeons. And he says, all right, okay, you keep racing pigeons. That was fine. So he then talked in general stuff. He says, right, come with me. So we walked out of his office, walked down to the next office, and he opened the door and says, George, this is Jimmy Fairlie. Jimmy, this is my son George. George, he's your new man. That was it.
Wow.
So I got my first job with him, and he was a dealer. So young George dealt with the sheep, old George dealt with the cattle. And it was the strange thing. I started with him, and if there's a wrong place to be, I found it. Sheep would knock me over because I was just this wee runt of a laddie. We went into the shed one day. So I started with him during the summer holidays and went up and did odd days. There was nothing happening because George was a dealer. There was no breeding stock there. It was just bits and pieces coming and going. So went into the shed to clip ewes, and he had the clipper was there and big Suffolk ewes. So I went in. George says, right, so hand her the chin, pull it over, and then just drag it back, sit it there, and when you get the next one ready for him, once he clips that, just you take the wool, I'll show you how to roll the fleece, and then put it in the bag. Easy. So, big Suffolk ewes. And so I went into the pen. There was nothing I was doing that was going to shift that. She just stood there and went, right, pal. And eventually he came in and showed me again, and he's, oh, for Christ's sake. So he dragged this out again, and God almighty, it was one of the worst days I can remember, dragging sheep. I just couldn't shift them. They were just too heavy for me. And for the first 6 months I was there, I was absolutely hopeless. I was worse than useless. And when old George died, he died very young. When he died, by this time he'd gone bankrupt, by the way. So he'd gone bankrupt, but they still owned the home farm. And old George had died, and young George had phoned me up and said, look, come up to the house after Dad's funeral, it'd be nice to see you. Because we'd all been paid off and had gone our separate ways. So I went up to the house, and George and I were sitting there, and he says, do you know that I was going to sack you? I said, right. He said, I was going to sack you. I said, what for? He said, you were useless. He said, you were always in the wrong place. You weren't getting on with the boys. You just never shut up. You kept asking questions. He said, so his dad said to the old man after about 6 months, look, I'm just going to get rid of young Jimmy. And he's like, oh, what's the problem? Oh, he's always in the wrong place. He's no use. He's too weak. He can't do the job. And always said, all right, just leave him alone. He'll be fine. And George said, no, I'm going to get... No, he'll be fine. Now, by this time, I was shepherding. I had a full shepherd's job. I was training dogs, selling pups, and I was providing the lamp at my brother's restaurant. So I got on. I made the job
From
work for
being
me.
paid off there, you got
Yeah.
a
From
shepherd's
being,
job.
from being paid off there. I had a couple of years out of farming altogether. I went away and I was a window cleaner. Started as a window cleaner, and then I got moved up with that company into some supervisory roles and then an area inspector role, and I hated just about every minute of it. But I'd bought a flat, and here was my lack of investment skills at that age. I bought a flat which very quickly rose in value. So rather than renting it out and taking some money and going off to Australia, I sold it, went off to Australia and spent every penny, and came back absolutely flat broke. But when I came back, I got started with a local contractor, and we did a lambing, and from there we went into clipping. Long story short, I landed up getting a job as a shepherd on an estate. Started off with a woman, and within 3 months, her mum pulled the plug for her and sold the place. It was a German businessman who came in and bought it. And then I was there for 13 years with them as a shepherd before I then went on and took my contract farm agreement on for Mansfield Estate. But in between times, I set up the first farmers market in Scotland in 1999 and set that up, and that got me out kind of into the wider farming community because I was still a townie.
Yeah,
I might have been shepherding, but I was still a townie. Even when I went to shows, it was quite obvious that I was not part of this community.
Yeah.
As in they didn't welcome you in, you
They
felt
didn't,
like?
no,
or-
they didn't.
Right.
They didn't welcome you. There was a couple. Dave Murray.
And that was
up
before
at
you were a
Lurgan.
politician,
That
eh?
was well before I was a politician. It wasn't until after the farmers market and I started getting around the country and speaking to folk and talking about, direct marketing and how we've got to change the relationship between the town and country. And I knew that relationship very well. It wasn't until I started doing all of that I kind of felt as though to a certain extent, the community actually went, okay, we'll let them in.
Let them in.
So that's kind of how I got started.
And you had the contract farmer agreement still on the go, is it?
No.
Are you totally out of farming again now? or-
Completely, yeah. I've made this statement on numerous occasions. If you're going to do this job and you're going to do another job, somebody's not getting value for money.
Yeah.
And the way I looked at it was, I chose to do this, so do it properly. So we came out of the hill farm in 2017. So I took in a contract farm agreement with 2,200 ewes, 75 sucklers. We fattened everything ourselves, kept all our own replacements. So it was a big handling. And it was
And
great.
who was working
Loved it.
there?
There was myself as a full-time shepherd, and we had contractors came in, so we'd contract shearing, contract silage, all that sort of stuff. It was hard going. It was bloody hard going. But we continued with doing the farmers market. So I left Glenern. We had a good reputation at Glenern for the quality of lamb. Then we went up to the hill farm that we took on, carrying on with the farmers market. But in 2008, when the financial crash, so I could go to the farmers market and we'd sell 6 lambs, and a good chunk of a side of beef, and it made it worthwhile. Lamb prices were creeping up, so there's still that differential, so that there was still reasonable profit to be made. 2008 came, and people's spend dropped dramatically. So when we'd have customers come to the market and they'd say, I'll get 2 racks, I'll get a shoulder and give me a dozen chops and we'll get that. So they'll spend 30, 40, 50 quid. They were coming and buying a shoulder and spending a tenner. Yeah. So that change was dramatic. So we started putting a load of food into the freezer. And thinking, first of all, we started taking it to farm shops because there was a proliferation of farm shops around about Perthshire. So we just put stuff in farm shops, but they were taking away the profit. So we were effectively going to the farmers market, taking half the income, then giving it to farm shops. They'd get the profit, and we were saying, well, what was the point of selling it? So it started to get really out of kilter for us. 1993 actually, my wife and I were together. Wee one was our daughter was about 6 months old. And I went to a U2 concert, massive U2 fan. Went to all their concerts from as young as I can remember up until they just got ridiculous. And went along to this concert. Halfway through the gig, I went for a burger, felt sick. Came out of the gig, and Anne says, she picked me up. She says, how did it go? Oh, brilliant. They were absolutely fantastic. Raving. However, I had a burger halfway through. I'm feeling sick as a dog now. It's just sitting there. He says, there's better be a market for good quality food at these events, eh? Yeah, it could be. Never thought any more about it. It was gone. fast forward to 2008, we were in our own farm, we were doing farmers markets, we had all this meat in the freezer, putting stuff to farm shops. And Anne says, we need to do something with this meat. We need to cook it somehow. We need to do something with it. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. I'm busy working on the farm. Anne's doing all her stuff. She says, nah, we've got far too much meat in here. She's a chartered accountant, so pounds, shillings and pence all had to make sense. We need to stop doing this farmers market. We're just waiting. I said, I can't do that. We need to keep going. We've got folk that have been coming to us for 16 years. We're no stopping now. Runrig came to Scone Palace to do an event. And Anne said, oh, that meat. Let's see if we can go to that Runrig concert. A friend of mine, Dougie Watson, who was in SAOS at the time, he phoned me up and says, Runrig are going to Scone Palace. You guys should maybe do something. Perth Farmers Market went, wonder if we could get into Runrig. So there was all this stuff swirling around. Long story short, we put on a marquee with Perth Farmers Market and 8 of us went in to do the food supply at a festival. That's effectively what it was. And so there was 6 food trucks down that side, 6 food trucks down that side, and there was the Perthshire Farmers Market food marquee up the top end. And Steve from Buffalo.
Yeah, Stevie Mitchell.
Stevie Mitchell.
Yep.
Stevie had done gigs before. He'd cooked burgers and gone to events, so he joined us because he was at the farmers market. And I went out and bought a garden barbecue.
Like a gas one. I
A
take it.
gas garden barbecue, right? It was big. We spent a lot of money. We thought, this is the very business. This will do the job. And we had about 6 or 7 of us all working behind it because we were going to be so professional. So we were at this gig and we had brown rolls, we had white rolls, we had baguettes, we had relishes, and we tried to do festival food like it was a restaurant. So, yes, and what can we get you? And we were very nice and all the rest of it, and I'm cooking away at the back. As a friend of me, as a chef, he'd worked in my brother's restaurant, and him and I became quite pally. He had his own restaurant in Perth. And him and I went into this kitchen and we handmade all these burgers and done all the seasoning, put all these herbs and everything in. Fantastic. Top of the range. Oh my God, we were terrible. We were absolutely hopeless.
Can you keep up?
Oh God, no. That literally folk were queuing for an hour to an hour and a half to get the good quality food. But the point was a lot of them had come from Europe and they were looking at the burger vans and going, nah, we're no going there. These guys are doing good food. And they were waiting in the queue. They were waiting for ages. And we probed every single burger. And because they were all different thicknesses, because we'd handmade them, we were shambolic. But loved it. Absolutely loved it. So we went from there and we then set up a business. Anne and I set up a business. We did this kind of, we tried to include other farmers in it, and I won't bore you with the details of how we got to Tea in the Park. I mean, we went to Tea in the Park and that then became a big part of our business. And I don't know how we got onto that, actually. I'm kind of rambling.
No, so did you, and will you continue to utilise all your own meat?
Yes. That was the whole point. We took the beef and lamb from the farm and then we went into all these events and we just got really good at it. So we did the Highland Show, we did Tea in the Park, we did the World Pipe Band Championships, we did a load of other wee events all around about the area, and it became a big, big part of the business. And every year Anne would say, chartered accountant, remember? You'd say, estate, staff, grass, rents, that. You're working 7 days a week for that. Or, let's look at that.
What the odd day for this?
Yeah. So we kind of, we cut down the hill place. We cut that back in 2014 and went to just 800 ewes, 35 coos. Kept the farm and the catering side going, and that became a bigger part of the business. And then in 2014, 2017, did that for 3 years. In 2017, decided, now we're going to come out of the farm. There was too many things that I couldn't control. That's one of the bits about contract.
You don't own the place.
Yeah, there's too many things that I couldn't control about what was happening. So Brexit happened and I predicted that we were going to have problems with trade deals with other countries and all the rest of it. Now, as it turned out, sheep trade right now absolutely through the roof. So Brexit definitely isn't affecting the sheep trade right now.
Who gets the credit for doing the deals for the sheep?
For export
for export
for demand.
sheep. Yeah. Well, not so much demand because I get demand, but who who gets the credit for sorting that out so quick? Because
Well,
the first day it happened, it was all panic. It's like it's all over. It's a disaster.
Yeah.
Nowhere to send the sheep, and then it just boomed almost a week later.
Yeah, well,
So was this the Tories at the time that sorted that out? I mean, it must have been.
No. That's just supply and demand. That's just market-driven forces.
But supply. So just the fact that Europe want it so bad, they don't worry about putting barriers up.
I don't think it's that. I think there's been agreements been put in place, but I'm not entirely convinced that that's what's causing the supply of sheep at the moment. There's been reduction in the numbers that are available. But to be perfectly honest with you, I don't actually understand what's going on with the sheep trade right now. I just check in every now and again and say, they're getting what? Around 20 quid for a blackie hog.
Yeah.
So, which is great. No, that's fantastic.
It's all needed. It's all needed. It's all needed. That's our party line.
There's the sage advice. It's all needed, and save all that profit that you're making now for a rainy day, because it might come a rainy day yet.
Well, the good thing about farmers in the farming community is, you know, people use this argument. We're talking about subsidies at times as well. Is like none of it's going to the Cayman Islands.
No,
you know, it's all getting spent.
Staying here, spent locally.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely.
all spent. It's all spent.
The one good thing about a farmer is they get the money and they spend it.
Absolutely,
it goes straight in the local community.
Yeah.
So yeah,
because with farming, you have to
that.
keep moving forward with farming, or you fall behind.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
you can't catch up.
No,
That's as a lot of people have found over the years. You know, that is one issue with it. And the lamb thing is good just now.
Yeah,
beef thing. I think so. I don't know much about beef, but. It seems kind of it's a nervy thing because of high input costs and stuff.
Yeah.
What about this beef calves scheme? Actually, I better ask you about that. I don't know much about it, but
okay. Look, I said to you right at the start, status quo is not going to be an option. So we're going to change things. We're going to try to get emissions down and all the rest of it. The beef calf scheme was brought in so that the calving interval is 410 days
to improve efficiency.
To improve efficiency, yeah.
Okay.
Now, you remember we had the beef efficiency scheme. Don't know that actually delivered what it was set out to deliver. The farmer-led groups were all about, you know, how do we drive down emissions, make cattle more efficient. This is part of what came out of the farmer-led groups, was getting that calving index down to 400, well, to less than 410 days at the moment. But that's the starting point. Where it goes beyond this, we'll just have to wait and see. I think there was definitely an issue around the communication of when it was going to kick in. But the reality is it's kicking in. You know, it's coming in 2025, and there is a bump that we need to get over right now. And we've accepted that. I've had a lot of conversation with stakeholders, a lot of conversation with farmers, spoken to officials about how we manage that. And one of the things that has come out of that process is that I remember when I was farming that I'd get a letter from the NFU and I'd pick it up and go, oh yeah, I'll get to that. Read it later on. Or NSA would send me something. Oh yeah, that's probably important, but I'll read that. I'll wait till it's raining. You know, other mail would come in and it'd go into the rainy day pile. We've all got a rainy day pile. If I got a Scottish Government letter in and the Scottish Government stamp on the top, I went, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to read that. And I'd take the time and I'd read it because they were trying to tell me something. And if they were telling me something, then it meant I was probably going to have to do something. So that has now been implemented. I don't know when it actually stopped, to be honest with you, but that's now been implemented that we will absolutely be sending out the communications to people that when there are changes coming, you will hear it from us. We won't be relying on NFU or Scottish Beef Association or anybody else. It will come from us. So that you get the point directly to your inbox that it's coming from the government. So that's definitely one of the things that we'll be taking forward. But things, and as we go into 2025 and the policy starts to change, you'll get the notification from the government on government-headed paper so that you know what it is.
Most foragers don't supply sheep and cattle with enough cobalt, copper, iodine and selenium, critical to digestion, immunity, reproduction and growth. When it comes to supplementation, there's a danger of under or oversupply. But when bolusing with Animax Tracesure, you can be sure every animal has enough for up to 6 months in one single application. Animax, giving what it takes.
I mean, one thing about this beef calf scheme that people keep saying to me about, because obviously I don't have beef cattle, I don't really know much about it, other than what people tell me, is what happens if your cow has a dead calf?
The policy officials right now, because we have raised this, I've spoken to about officials about it, I've spoken to farmers about it, we have raised this and it is in the mix. We're still having conversations about how we're going to look at potential mitigations in that, but that's still all in the mixing pot. And look, see, whenever you bring in a new policy, there's going to be wrinkles that we need to try and iron out, and that's just part of the process. And I think one of the things that we're doing well is that we're talking to the industry all the time about, so what does it look like in practical terms. So we are working through what these issues are going to be, but be under no illusion. We're trying to get rid of inefficient cows that are in the system, and part of that is making sure we tighten that calving index. And there's always going to be bits and pieces either side. That's just the way
it's hard to bring a policy in for it to be perfect straight away. I mean, to me, it takes strong leadership or good government to be able to say, actually, this bit's not quite right. Let's tweak it.
Yeah.
What I hate to see is when they just dig their heels in and say, no, we wouldn't get something wrong. Yeah. So this is right, and we're not moving it. So it's good for me, and that's why I'd like him to listen to this, and especially you, is be able to say, actually, that needs tweaked.
Yeah, well, you can be rest assured that I am never going to go, I'm right, even when I know I'm not.
Yeah.
So if we're getting it wrong, then we will always try to find a way to make sure that it's going to work practically. Because it has to. The other thing about it is, farmers have done a phenomenal job in reducing their emissions since we started the baseline. I think it was 1990, and started to get that baseline. We've already cut the emissions. The industry's already cut the emissions about 50%. Now it gets more difficult. Now it gets harder to go on. But the farmers will do it because they're very, very good at what they do.
I mean, I think the farming community in general are aware of their need to change and their need to, become more efficient. I mean, I think that even in terms of a financial point of view, efficiency is key these days with the cost of the inputs. But of course, they're accepted of the environmental impact that farming has. I think the big thing, and I'm on this camp as well, the big thing that I have about it all is that, yes, we produce, it's 20% of the emissions or whatever.
Third biggest emitter in the country
is farming of methane.
Methane is probably the
just
first
greenhouse
one.
gases
is generally third biggest emitter in the country.
Yeah, but there's arguments to that too as well. Like the methane thing lasts 15 years.
How you measure it? Methane
carbon dioxide lasts 100 years, so it's
or longer.
Yeah. So there's arguments that, but let's say a third of the emissions.
Yeah.
Right? But
third highest emitter.
Oh, so the third highest emitter. So not actually a third of the emissions then.
No, the third highest emitter. Whatever that ratio is. Can ask me off the top of my head.
No, I know what you're saying. So we're not a third of the emissions, but so we're a big input to the emissions.
Big contributor.
But we're
to
almost 100% of the food. Do you know that's my argument to it?
How do you mean?
Well, like the farmers are producing, virtually all the food in the country. Mm-hmm. But so folk go hard about these emissions, but there's always going to be emissions.
Well, absolutely.
Whereas there's things going on that doesn't need to go on.
Yeah.
For example, and it's an easy one to throw this one up, air travel's an easy one to target. That's my argument. There's these airline companies that,
but they are
all the headlines about the farming.
Yeah. But those airline companies are working just as hard as the farming community to reduce their emissions.
But an argument I've got about that is Ryanair, I know that's an Irish thing, but they buy a farm and they're like, we're moving towards net zero. It's like, well, that farm was already there.
Yeah, I know.
Nothing's changed.
Yeah, I know. There are, there's the conversations around what greenwashing is and all the rest of it. And, that's a conversation over there. But in terms of, to make the point about aviation, there's the I can't remember what it's called now. I was just reading about it when I was coming down the road. It's the aviation fuel, where they're working towards reducing its impact. They're working towards hydrogen. They're working towards electricity. The sectors, every sector is now saying, how are we going to do this? What's not acceptable is for a company just to carry on its polluting behaviour and then buy a farm, planting the trees to say,
offset it.
We are green.
Yeah.
Because that all they're doing is going to offset one or the other. But you're right, you can't produce food without producing emissions. And we absolutely accept that. And anybody that's listening to this should also accept, we already know, the government is already well aware that the farming community are doing a hell of a lot already. So I'd like to try and change the relationship and the narrative from them and us to we've got to do this together. It's a team effort.
Yeah. I mean, part of the reason a lot of us, including myself, have our backup is the media. We're going hard for a while. I mean, it's eased off a lot now, I think, but they were going really hard for a while. That the farmers were the cause of it all, especially cattle. Cattle was the cause of it all. They were going hard on this narrative. And a lot of us, to me, it just looks so corrupt because it's like there's big money behind pushing. Well, it's like a fugazi. It's like, look at the farmers, don't look at us. You know,
Yeah.
look at the farmers, don't look at us.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it strikes me as.
Yeah. Well,
it's eased off now, I would say.
The narrative was definitely it's all the farmers' fault, and I was picking that up myself, and got to get rid of the cattle and all the rest of it. What bothered me, I have to say, and again, this came from opposition politicians as well as from the media, was this narrative that was around the government are going to get rid of 100,000 cows in order to meet their meat. That was never the policy. It was never the policy intention. But one of the ironic things is that there was a calculation was done around how many inefficient cows are there in the system, and there was about 100,000 of them. So when they were looking at the farmer-led groups, if there was 100,000 inefficient cows, get rid of them. That didn't mean to say reduce the herd by 100,000. That meant get rid of 100,000 inefficient cows.
Yeah.
That's not the same thing as saying, cut
Reduce
the
the
herd
herd.
by 100,000. We can't afford to cut the herd by 100,000. The critical mass requires us to have at least, if not more than what we currently have. So that
To keep up with supply.
you've got to keep your critical mass there. If there's not a critical mass, then you don't have the slaughtering facilities, you don't have the processing facilities, you don't have the infrastructure in order to sustain that industry. So we're very cognizant of that as well, that the critical mass is really important. And we want to continue to be world-class food producers. That's at the bottom line, that's what we are. As a farming community, that's what the farmers do. They produce, high-class, world-class protein from grass, where there's nothing else you can grow there.
Well, in talking about our high standards, and we absolutely are, one of the best in the world, without a doubt. But one other issue that comes up a lot is the import of other meats. Now, I've said in this podcast a million times, I've no issue with New Zealand lamb, for example. Absolutely no issue, because the guys over there are getting about 60 quid, 70 quid a head for the lambs. We're getting, double that. So there's a place for everyone at the moment. If the supermarkets want to sell that, fine. The issue I have, and I think this applies with some places we import beef from as well, is that New Zealand standards are not the same as ours, but we can import that meat. And I'll give you an example. There's a product, and I've used this before, and I believe it's still the case. In New Zealand, you can use a product called Smart Shot with selenium component to it, okay, to give the lambs a boost.
Right.
But you're not allowed to use that here because it's unfit. Allegedly, I should say, unfit for human consumption. I think there's been a lot of tests to say that's a lot of nonsense.
Okay.
But we can import those lambs from New Zealand that get this product, but we're not allowed to use it here. Is madness to me. It's a double standard.
Yeah,
And it's
well-
like handicapping your own farmers at home and giving the advantage to the guys across the water.
Okay, I'm now going to be accused of blaming Westminster.
Okay.
The trade deals are entirely in Westminster's remit. We don't have
So
any
they get the
control.
credit for the good lamb prices.
They get the credit for the lamb.
You can slack them, you've got to give them a wee bit as well.
But we can't control the trade deals. In fact, we weren't even included in any of the negotiations around the trade.
So even meat that comes to Scotland, you don't get any say in it.
Well, what's even worse about that is now, since we left the EU, the UK Internal Market Act means that a product that is sold in any other part of the UK must be able to be sold in Scotland. So even while we've got devolved policies, if I'm trying to think of an example, can't think of an example off the top of my head, but if we were wanting to put specific requirements for a product to be sold in Scotland, and the UK didn't agree with it, we couldn't stop that product coming in here because you've got to have market alignment. Now, I understand the principle behind it, but it does really restrict the ability of the Scottish Government to protect the standards that you're talking about for us here. So, and that's, when we got into the whole conversation, and, credit to some of the UK politicians that did say, we won't be having hormone-fed beef and all the rest of it. But we couldn't stop it in here even if we wanted to. Because
So if they say yes,
if
it'll come to
they say
Scotland?
yes, then it has to come to Scotland. We can't stop that. So the UK Internal Market Act, the Subsidy Control Act, which is another one that was brought in post-Brexit, the UK Internal Market Act, despite the fact that we have got devolved powers, you don't have all the responsibilities. So, if we wanted to say, if you're going to sell lamb here in Scotland, then it has to be produced to exactly the same standards as our farmers are required to produce it, because we put that pressure on our farmers to do so. We can't make that happen. That comes from Westminster.
I'd actually flip it the other way in this one and actually say that we're in the wrong, because actually this product's fine. You know, I don't know who's in charge of, you know, vets or whatever should be coming to the government and saying, well, listen, if you can import New Zealand lamb that's using this product, why can't our farmers use it to give their lambs a boost? You know, okay, I'm flipping it the other way. I'm actually saying New Zealand's better than us.
I remember having long before I got elected, I remember having I organised a post-Brexit conversation with farmers and dealers and dairy farmers and what have you. And one of the beef guys that was there actually said this: if they want to bring an American hormone-injected beef, why don't we just do it? You think of the decades that it's taken us to build up the reputation of the quality of the food that we are producing. Because I remember when hormones used to be allowed. When I first started out, you used to stick a wee tab in the back of cattle's lug, and that was a growth promoter. And they were banned. I can't remember what year they were banned, but it has taken us decades post BSC. The reason I started the farmers market in Perth was because BSE had kicked in, Frankenstein Foods, because you're talking about GM. That was happening, and the narrative from the media was farmers are trying to poison the country. Yeah, we were. You think we're under attack at the moment, or the industry's under attack at the moment. At that point, you know, farming, we were absolutely poisoning the country. Banned from Europe, absolutely decimated the Scottish beef trades. You know, there was guys literally went out of business overnight. It was horrendous. And it took a long, long time to get us back to that place where we are at the moment, where, again, we're recognised as world class. So anything that was going to undermine that, to me, would be a race to the bottom. And I think from our point of view, we want to continue to have that. We are the best in the world, and we'll continue to strive to be the best in the world and continue that reputation. People want to come to Scotland to soak up the atmosphere, look at our scenery, and know that the stuff that they're getting straight from that farm over there is, it doesn't get any better.
So they can take decades to build up, but literally you could lose it overnight.
If we did something that was trying to match up to that.
In fairness, you're saying there about, you know, farmers being under attack now. Like, I feel it's totally changed from COVID. Like, I feel like actually maybe a few bare shells or whatever has totally changed it. And I don't feel like farmers are under attack anymore. Like, you know, there's the odd snipe here and there, but I think even the media's retrained its focus elsewhere.
I feel like even the trend around veganism and things has died down a bit.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that was like a sort of fashion thing for a while, but I think that...
Yeah, well, most of them are back on meat now. They realised how crazy that was. Like, that's how that's...
Anemic.
Yeah, that's it. It's like CrossFit. Remember CrossFit?
Yeah,
it's huge. And then everybody's like, hurt my back. That's it. Back to normal gym. You get these wee fads that come and go. Pokemon cards. That was fun.
Tamagotchi.
Tamagotchis, exactly. I mean, when that...
You guys are all realising just how old I am.
Like, you know Pokemon. Everybody knows Pokemon. It was so big. You've got to throw that into some of your things to win over the young voters.
Absolutely.
Do you play the PlayStation? I love the PlayStation. That old still game thing. Do you like that rapper music? When
I used to get a phone, I'd give it to my 7-year-old daughter and say, set that up, darling. She'd go, oh, Dad. And off she'd go and she'd set it up. Now you just bump them, apparently.
It's all the same phone.
I've never set up a phone in my life. I gave it to my daughter and said, going to sort that, sweetheart.
So what, I'm just picturing your life. So you had your food, your market
catering
business set up, your farm, your farming was your passion, your animals. What was it that made you make the complete shift away from it and to choose politics to go into?
I didn't choose politics, I chose independence.
Okay.
That was, I may get some severe criticism for this. I didn't go into this with a burning desire to be a public servant. And if I said that, I'd be a liar, and I'm not, so I'm not going to say it. I got into it purely because I wanted Scotland to be an independent country. It was that simple.
Really?
Yeah. When we lost the referendum in 2014, I was utterly heartbroken. I couldn't believe that we were the only country in the world who had the opportunity to vote for its independence and didn't take it. I could not get my head around how any country could not want to look after its own affairs. You can argue the rights and wrongs of independence, but that was my driving thing. I wanted Scotland to be an independent country. And I remember speaking to, he's actually now our First Minister, and said, because I've known John for decades. In fact, John stood against my dad. I hated politics, right? I never wanted to be a politician. I hated politics with a passion because as a boy, my dad was the deputy leader of the SNP. He stood in 4 or 5 different campaigns. So I knew all about street campaigning, delivering leaflets, getting posters up in windows from a very, very young age. As one of 5, we sat around the dinner table and had dinner every night together, and inevitably the conversation would get into politics. There was politicians in our house. My dad was never off the phone. There was piles of newspapers, because we didn't have social media where you could store everything on a phone. You had piles of newspapers. Dad would get up at 5:30 in the morning, go and buy 5 or 6 newspapers and sit and pour through newspapers. He'd take wee cuttings out of quotes from people, because that was the political game that he was in. I hated it.
Yeah.
The house was just full of politics, but I must have absorbed it by osmosis or something. And I remember John actually stood against my dad for the nomination in Perth when he was just a young guy. So anyway, fast forward. I turned about 18, 19, always voted SNP, always voted independence. And so that was fine.
But this is back when SNP didn't really exist.
Oh,
Labour were dominating.
No, Labour completely dominated Scotland. The SNP were seen as a kind of a radical, extreme kind of weirdos. And some of the campaigns that we went to with my dad were pretty unpleasant. You know, the treatment that we got was actually really pretty nasty. So I was well aware of what the other side of, you know, this soaring success that we've had in the last 10 years. I am well aware of what the other side of that looks like when it's not going your way. But after the referendum, and we'd lost. In fact, I'm going to rewind a wee bit because my wife always gives another mention here. In 2013, I said, I'm going to start campaigning for the referendum. She goes, what for? I said, Scotland's been independent. And she says, I actually thought you might have not thought of this yourself. You're a wee bit brainwashed. What do you mean? I was outraged. How dare you? She goes, well, your entire family are nationalists. You were all brought up in an SNP household. Have you ever thought about it for yourself? Don't you dare. And I stormed off in the huff and went, maybe I better have a wee think about this. And I did. And I went away and I read and I did some research. Now, I might have been, you know, entrenched in my own beliefs. I have no idea. And I can't say. But I read as much as I could and it made me worse. It was like, why in God's name are we no independent? So, fast forward, we lost the independence referendum. And I was on the phone to John and saying, something's wrong. It was too close, and there is this surge. And he says, we lost. It's that simple. We need to just get on. I says, yeah, but the country's changed. He says, look, if you're that passionate about it, go and get elected. He says, you only do this by getting elected, becoming part of the government and, you know, getting into a political career. I'm like, oh, God, no into that. But I'd spent 18 months campaigning, so I'd done a lot of the debates and all that sort of stuff.
You were into it then?
I was already into it. So I put myself forward. I did a lot of campaigning for the party, and it was just like, okay, start again. Now, for me, it was, you know, carrying on what I'd been doing as we were kids, but it was like, start again. We lost, starting again. And then when Rosanna Cunningham had announced that she was standing down for 2021, I put myself forward for the nomination. But the party's, you know, pretty brutal. The party will say, who are you? Why are you standing? Are you going to be the right person for the job? And it's a process they put you through, which is good. And anyway, they put me through the process, and then I won the nomination and then stood for the election. But what that meant was, by this time I was out at the hill farm, but we still had 120 odd acres of land. I still had enough cattle and sheep to provide all the meat that I needed for the catering business. And I still had breeding sheep. I kept all my good blackies, all your dad's tip lambs. I don't know if you know, I bought a lot of tips off Iona's dad.
There you go.
Great stock.
Is he an SNP man?
You don't need to answer that.
Yes, of course he is.
I like it. I went back.
Oh, very good, very good. That's not why I bought his tips, by the way.
I know. I was going to say then when the next. I was trying to think quickly of an opposition guy there. Then when Douglas Ross is in looking for a tup, he's like, "Oh, love the Tories." Big Tory fan, Douglas. I've got to tell you.
You could well.
By that in there, you've got my vote.
John wouldn't be so cynical. But, anyway, I won the nomination, went into the campaign, and after I won the nomination, I thought, breeding ewes, breeding coos, if I start to actually make headway here. So I took the decision, breaking my heart, I have to tell you, sold all the breeding stock, put my ewes through the ring. I remember that day. John McPherson at Ballymena bought some of my best ewes, and it was a tough day, that one. But anyway, all the breeding stock went, and we were about 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the way through the campaign. I thought, I'm going to win this. I was on the doors every day. I thought, I'm going to win this. There's no way I can start in Parliament and have stock, or all the fat stock still there. So I put them all through the ring, bar one bullock, put that in the freezer, just in case. And then I won the seat, and Anne her and I did the business together. She'd given up being a chartered accountant. We were doing the business together. So the idea was for the first year that what she'd do is she would get somebody. So we would stop doing the big events, the Transmit and the Royal Highland Show and stuff like that. We'd stop doing that, but we would do one-off ones with a trailer. So we could drive in with a trailer, wheels down, do a day's event, and then back out again. And but she would just get somebody to come in and help her do the driving and do the cooking and all the stuff that I used to do. And first one we did, actually, it was the horse trials up at Blair Athol. And it turned out that was a 3-day event. She goes, that's fine, 3 days, I'll get somebody to do over the weekend. I ended up cooking over the weekend. So I was in the Parliament Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Anne was at the gig on the Thursday. I'd helped her set up on the previous Sunday. Back up again on the Friday to cook, back on the Friday to cook, back on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday to cook, and then breaking down on the Monday. We're not doing this again. No. Yeah, we either get somewhere or we pack it in all together. And then we decided that we were going to pack it in. Trailer was still sitting there, and we got contacted by the Rare Breed Survival Trust. We used to do their. They've got an event in Forfar every year, or in Lanark. It's the Smallholders Association, Scottish Smallholders Association. They contact us, look, will you do the gig? I says, yeah. What do you think? It's right, okay, that'll be our final hurrah. So that was it. We did the Scottish Smallholders Association. That was our final gig in 2021, end of 2021, and just packed it in completely, just sold all the stuff.
How did that feel doing that?
Oh, well, I loved the gigs. I loved it because you're and there's pride in it.
It's your stuff as well. I think there's
good produce,
real quality food, and people
championing farming.
Oh, that was brilliant.
And you've taken it right through. Like you're seeing literally the whole process.
And that story from farming to delivery to the eating stage, we made a huge thing about it. I had a board with a picture of me with a Galloway coo out on the side of a hill. And then the process that we went through with this picture of this big juicy burger at the bottom.
Yeah.
And it was like, there's your connection. Yeah. And that connection to me has always been vital. That we, coming from the town and going into the countryside, it was never the twain shall meet. And one of the big things about the farmers market was bringing that relationship back together. So you're saying we don't get nearly, the industry doesn't get nearly the same level of abuse now. But it doesn't because the public are not buying it. They're not buying into that narrative anymore.
Yeah.
So those kind of things. And there's folk all over the country doing similar stuff where they're farmers that are dealing directly with the public and creating that link. So it was a wrench, to say the least. It was a big wrench. And even now, I still miss it. So I'm going to Blair Athol trials next week. And I'm going to be going, and I'm going to say, we could have had a trailer there.
Yeah.
Going to the Highland Show. I was in the Highland Show for 2 days, and where are they guys again? And I keep looking to see, this would be a good gig for us.
Yeah.
So I do miss it, and I miss, see once they start cutting the barley, and you start getting that autumn smell, and you start seeing the tups start to, lift themselves up, and the smell changes. Love that time of year. So I guarantee you, over the next 3 or 4 weeks, I'm going to look like a bear with a sore head.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be sitting in an office and I'm going to be looking at tip lambs. So.
Yeah.
I appreciate the time's gone here, Jim. You're a busy man. Something we better ask, though. We better just speak about subsidy. Like it's a big thing. It's a huge thing. It is the thing for a lot of farmers.
I don't call it subsidy. I call it support.
Support. I like that better. Yeah. I'm wrong. Subsidy. Yeah, subsidy is like subsidising. Okay. Support. I like that. That's nice. What about support?
We're committed to it.
Okay.
Short answer is that we're committed to it. It's going to change. So the Cabinet Secretary, Mary Goujon, has all of your listeners will know. She's the cabinet secretary. So effectively, she's my boss in agriculture. Fiona Hislett's my boss in transport, and she has worked with the NFUS, and she created the ARIOB, the Agricultural Reform Implementation Oversight Board. So that was they've sat for the last 3 years in some very robust discussions about what the new support system should look like. But it's starting to happen now. So you mentioned earlier on the beef calf scheme. So that's one of the first implementations of it. And farmers can now get support just now for doing things like soil testing, putting in farm plans and stuff like that. So the whole farm plan, I think it's 2025, it has to be implemented. There's a route map, okay? So probably the best thing for folk to get a proper understanding of it is go on to the Scottish Government website. If you guys could post a link, that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Go on to the Scottish Government website and look for the route map. And I'm going to make this point in all seriousness. You know how I spoke to you earlier on and said, if you get a Scottish Government letter in, well, take this as the Scottish Government letter. Read that route map so that you know what's coming, because changes are coming. And they need to be aware of what they are. Don't get caught out. Be well prepared, because there are opportunities to start getting involved right now in order to make sure that transition is as smooth as it possibly can be. Because we're using a huge amount of public money, and we've got to be able to justify that for public good. If I was sitting in the health portfolio, I'd be saying 650, 670 million quid a year going into farming. What could I do with that 650 million quid? Or if I was in education, or if I was in justice, or any other portfolio department, they would all be saying, we could use that money. And there will be an element of people in the community, in the country, to say, why are we giving all that subsidy, which I think is the wrong word, to farmers? We know how vital it is to have that support, and we will continue to do it as long as we can continue to get the budget to do so. But the farming community really need to get their heads around, this is a change that's coming, and get in to the Scottish Government website, look for the route map, and that will give you the details of the step-by-step changes. As I say, I'm not going to outline them here, it's quite complicated, but get it into your head now. This is your Scottish Government letter with a wee badge on the top of it. Find out what's going on so that you understand what changes are coming.
As well, just now, how many years are they guaranteed for? Like, is there like we're guaranteed it to 2028, or where's it sitting at the moment?
I think the beef calf scheme is until 2028. We've given a commitment to that. I think that's right. However, when we were in the EU, and this is really important, when we were in the EU, we had a 7-year, multi-year funding guarantee. You knew what the pot was, and you could not tinker with it, you could change it to suit your conditions as long as it stayed within the framework of what the cap was. Now, the cap, for all its faults, and it had many, the one thing it gave you was certainty. There was absolute certainty that money was coming. Well, we've got none, and I mean quite literally none. The previous Tory government had given a commitment until at least 2025 or the end of this Parliament. So given the fact that they're now a government, does that mean that the funding guarantee has gone? I think we're committed until 2025, where the funding will come from. But the position that we're in at the moment is we've got no guarantee at all in the Scottish Government of where the funding for agriculture will come from. We've got nothing from the UK government at all. The NFU have quite rightly put demands into the Labour government just now to say, you need to give us this assurance. Farming is a long-term investment. You can't just, go on an annual budget. And there's quite a number of things involved here. And I'm going to get, not political, but I'll try and not get too technical.
I enjoy it.
We currently get 17% of the UK budget for agriculture. But we get that justifiably on the basis of the amount of weight that Scottish agriculture carries. There's a huge amount of pressure put on Scottish agriculture.
So we get 17% of the UK's total budget?
Of agricultural funding.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, of agricultural funding.
That came via the EU. That was how the EU had split it because of how Scotland farms. We've got very unique challenges. There's a bit rural depopulation.
Oh, do you think that's quite a lot?
No, I think that's...
I mean, 17% seems quite low.
Yeah, no,
that's the absolute minimum that we should be getting.
Yeah.
If anything, we should be asking for more.
Yeah.
So the NFU ask was that the UK government increase the UK budget by $1 billion to, I think that would take it up to $3.5 billion. And out of that, an extra 180 million would then come to Scotland if we stuck to the 17%. They would like it to be more, and so would we, so that we could actually do more. And at the moment, we've got no guarantees whatsoever. Now, one of the arguments that I used to make during the Brexit campaign was, if we are out of the EU, will the UK government barnetise the funding to agriculture? Now, that would make it about 8.4%. So if you take the entire UK budget and 8.4% came to Scotland, you'd effectively be cutting it in half. So we need at least the 17%, and we need an increase in the spend that's going into agriculture from the UK government, and then we need a multi-annual year guarantee that will then come to Scotland in funding. And I know what you're going to ask me. You're going to ask me about the money that was taken out. That was money that came from the Bew review, and the government, in order to meet the challenges of the budget that we were facing at that time, had taken some of that unspent funds. Now, all the money that was allocated for agriculture was spent in agriculture, but that was extra money that was going to be doing different things, because that was money that came out of the Bew review.
It's you remember about 60 million, was it?
Yeah, well, it was actually, I don't know if you remember the history of this. There was £191 million that was identified that should have come to Scotland as a result of the scale of our farming in Scotland. And there was 191 million that was identified. And I think there was only 100, I think there was about 135 of that. I can't remember the exact figures, I'm sorry. There was about 130 million of that was never paid to Scotland. So there was about a 6 or 7 year campaign, which Jim Walker eventually got sorted, and that money came north to Scotland. But it was additional money that should have been paid from previous years, and the UK government had held it. I remember the debates happening at the time, the arguments happening at the time, and they were saying, oh, well, it's too closely linked now, it's all been wrapped up and all the rest of it. It was nonsense. They were just trying not to send the money back up to Scotland. Anyway, we eventually got it. And then the decision was, well, how are we going to spend that money? But it meant that there was a pot of money sitting there. It was about 61 million quid. And the Scottish government used that because of financial pressures that we were under as a result of shrinking economy, as a result of budget cuts to the Scottish government. That money was used. Now, it's ring-fence funding, so it's guaranteed it has to come back in. And the argument is always, well, when's it coming back in? When's it coming back in?
But who guarantees it?
Well, we have to guarantee it. Scottish government.
But then it's like you're guaranteeing it, but at the same point, and this isn't having a go, but it's like things happen.
Yeah, well,
like if you need if there's money needed to plug an NHS issue, then I'm not getting the wrong side of this here, but it's hard to argue that point.
It's NHS, it's teachers, it's local government. Everybody needs more money, because the mini budget. We all remember the money budget. That absolutely spiralled our costs. We've had major cuts to our capital budget.
So this Liz you're talking about? Aye.
So I'm not trying to duck the issue, right? Yeah. I'm genuinely not. We are under enormous pressure financially. So 61 million was used by the government and used properly, in my mind. 15 million of that came back. We have a guarantee from the Finance Secretary that the rest of the money will come back, but it's only going to come back in when we can start to see some daylight in our budgets. And right now, we don't. Right now, we are looking at really, really tough decisions. We don't want teachers to go on strike. We don't want nurses to go on strike. We don't want doctors to go on strike. So we're trying to manage all of those expectations. And bearing in mind, these people are seeing a cost of living rise in their household bills because of that mini budget and everything else that is going on. It's not all the UK government's fault. Don't get me wrong. You know, stuff that happened in Ukraine and the war in Ukraine, all these kind of things. These are all adding to the pressures. But that mini budget was an absolute disaster. You know what that did to people's mortgages, it absolutely spiked them. So people are rightfully saying, you know, my standard of living has dropped through the floor here. You need to help me. And if it's public sector, then there has to be ways to try and find that money for them. But it makes it really tough to then allow us to invest in the areas that we want to invest in. You know, we want to invest in infrastructure. We want to make sure that this transition to the kind of agriculture that we want, where it's sustainable, but it's also meeting its carbon emissions. If we want to do all of that, it takes money. And if we don't, and if effectively robbing Peter to pay Paul. It makes it really difficult to try and make it all work.
Yeah, it's a hard balance. I appreciate we've only got about 10 minutes left, and there's 2 or 3 points I just want to make before. One would be the tricky thing I think we're always up against when farming is that we're a small part of the vote, and at the end of the day, parties have to win votes, and the NHS is where the votes are, and teachers and schools are where the votes are. So it's always a worry for farmers that we're such a small part of the population, although we provide such a huge service to the rest of the population. I say a huge service. We're vital to the rest of the population. I think that's always a worry for us as farmers. Another thing as well, just to be a bit political, and I've said this before in the podcast, I've only voted once in my life. Right.
Okay.
Only once in my life.
You need to rectify that, Cammy.
And it was for independence.
Okay.
And I still say now, I don't know if it's the right thing or the wrong thing. I just did it more so out of principle of the thing. Like, probably similar to what you're saying. It's like, why wouldn't we want to rule our own affairs? And now looking at it moving forward, like, I probably still sit in that camp, if I'm honest. Partly, I mean, Brexit maybe had an impact on it slightly, but also the fact I don't see how SNP can succeed. And this is maybe me being controversial, and I'm sure we'll hear about it in the comments, but I just don't see how a Scottish government can succeed when it's a Scottish party, because the guys holding the purse strings are an English party who want you to fail. Like, the system is madness to me. So you're like, Labour want all of Scotland. Labour obviously want a big win in the next Scottish election. The best way for them to get a big win is to screw over the SNP as much as they can. Now, the SNP are good at screwing themselves over recently as well. There's no doubt about that. They had the glory days, like you say, for 10 years, and they blew it recently for a bit. And that was a factor. But I do think the recent election was more about getting rid of the Tories than actually screw the SNP. And it'll maybe swap round again. But do you not think that's a factor? It's like, how can the SNP succeed when the guys that are giving you the money want you to fail?
I'm going to be controversial now. This is one of the issues around devolution. I remember when the Smith Commission, after the referendum, was agreed, and 2 powers they're going to give us: tax-raising powers, tax-altering powers, and social security. The 2 third rails of politics. Tax and social security, the 2 things you don't want to touch. And it's difficult. However, there are still things that we can do, and we do. And in reality, we've had a difficult couple of years. Some of it of our own making, absolutely. But some of it has been a narrative that has managed to gain traction where the reality wasn't quite what it looked like. But we've done a lot of good stuff. And that's why the party won the majority in 2011. Is because people went, actually, they're working hard. They're trying to govern for the whole of Scotland. To go back to your point that you made about where are the votes, and it's not in farming. We lost our way with that, and I will admit that and probably get scolded for doing so. But we definitely lost our way in that. But we absolutely are not in that position now. The First Minister is sitting in our rural constituency in North Perthshire. The Cabinet Secretary for Economy and Deputy First Minister is Kate Forbes. She's sitting at the Gaeltacht. It doesn't get more rural than that. Yep. Minister for Women's Health is Jenny Minto. She's sitting in Argyll. Very rural. Your Minister for Agriculture is sitting in South Perthshire with a huge rural constituency and a background in farming. So that idea of the SNP governing for the whole of Scotland is very much alive and well when you look at what the government looks like when you've got your First Minister and your Deputy First Minister completely rooted in rural issues. It's not just about farming, it's about all rural issues. And then the ministers that are sitting around the table as well. So those conversations, I can assure you, they're happening, saying, well, what does that look like? How do we rural-proof? If we're going to bring in that policy, how do we rural-proof it? How do we make sure that rural Scotland gets a share of that, or we need to do things differently for rural Scotland? And that's definitely one of the areas that I think that we were failing, but we are absolutely back on track with that. As far as what's going to happen in the next elections, it's going to be tough. I mean, there's no getting away from it. When the national swing goes against you, the national swing goes against you. But we've just now got a period of time where we have to say to the people of Scotland, okay, we take that. It was a bloody nose. It was damn sore as well. But we're hearing you, and we'll make sure that what you're telling us are the things that we will react to. And I think with John Swinney, you've got somebody who's got a phenomenal amount of experience, but he's also he's got huge respect right across the chamber and in the country, because people know that he's no at it. He's there for the right reasons. He didn't want to be First Minister. You know, he'd taken a step back on the back benches. He's now been public about his personal circumstances, his wife, the illness that she has, and what that meant for his family life. He did this because he had to do it, because it was the right thing to do for the country at the time. And he has gone into it in a fashion that I just absolutely cannot get my head around. He's been absolutely phenomenal. He's been all over the country.
Steadied the ship's a good way to put it.
Completely steadied
I would
the
give
ship,
him
and
credit for that, absolutely.
He's brought a sense of calmness that wasn't there for a long time.
And
the one thing that people want on the doors is an end to this.
About to say that.
They just want rid of it.
Snide nonsense that was going on with like Hamza and like Douglas Ross.
Yeah.
See that pathetic.
They just want rid of it. And
point scoring.
Yeah. John's not got. That's not what he is.
Yeah.
He's sensible. He's calm.
I think he's won credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's won a lot of people over with that way of going about things and rid of these snide remarks and like this pettiness that went on. I appreciate we're at a time now. I know I've hijacked this last bit of the interview, Iona. But one last thing I want to mention before we wrap up is trees. What's happening with trees? Are we easing off of these trees? Because like, man, there's dairy farms about here getting planted in trees, Jim. It's wild.
Who sold the land to plant the trees?
I don't blame the farmers for that though. It's like you're retiring at the farm, you take the highest bid. I totally get that. But here's my question for you, right? To put you on the spot, and I've always wondered this, and I've never actually maybe not looked into it enough. But if the NHS is struggling, right, who buys these farms? Like, where's the money come from? If the NHS is struggling, how do we have money to buy £2-3 million farms at a time?
Well,
plant trees?
It's not the Scottish government that's doing it.
So where's the money come from?
It's private investors that are doing it. Private companies are doing it. Private individuals are doing it.
So Scottish companies?
Scottish companies, UK companies, other companies.
Yeah, well, that's all that stuff like is mad to me. Is like, you know, all these foreign money taking productive land out. To me, if you want to make a country weak, get its land out of productivity, get it in trees, like that. Well, that might be an extreme view, or a sceptical view, maybe.
It's a certain.
But we're in that kind of world.
There is a sceptical view, and don't get me wrong, I very much have got the mindset of it's got to be the right tree in the right place and for the right purpose.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Right. So
barren hills, nothing getting done.
Farming and forestry can go hand in hand. We've all had shelter belts. You know what it's like to have a shelter belt. You need them. And we want to get some native type woodlands recreated. But there's also an opportunity in rural Scotland to build. Now, we import about 86% of the timber that we use in this country. And I looked into this quite a bit before I became a government minister, because I was getting those conversations all the time. And so I went to Confor, who's the organisation who say they look after the forestry industry across the board. And I said, you guys are planting out good quality hill sheep farms, and you're getting subsidy. It's not a subsidy. There's no support that's doing that. He says, yeah, there might be support there, but that's not the driving force. The driving force is there is a market for quality timber, and Scotland has got a fantastic opportunity to produce more quality timber. 86% of the timber that we use in this country, I think, you import. And everybody thinks, but all you're doing is pulping it. How's that good? Or you're putting it to biomass. Well, it's not. Because I then went to a dinner with one of the largest kit house producers in the country, and they've designed a different way of engineering wood that'll take Scottish timber and engineer it differently in order to create kits. So they're starting to build in southwest Scotland all these timber kits. Now we've got a need and an ambition to build. I think there's another 110,000 new homes in Scotland. That number's only going to go up. So what we're actually looking at is a land use change, but it could actually be a really positive one if we build a timber industry in Scotland that is employing people in the long term, is creating manufacturing jobs, and we start to be far more self-sufficient in the timber that we're going to use in this country. Yeah, granted, there'll be some of it that's going to go to pulp, some of it will go to biomass, but we produce cattle and sheep that end up going into mince. It doesn't mean to say it's a bad product. So there is an opportunity here for us to diversify what we've actually got the ability to produce here in Scotland without taking away from the fact that farming is still going to be the core principle of producing food. But farmers sell the land. It's not the government that's selling the land. It's farmers will sell the land, And I get we've got issues around, foreign investment and all the rest of it. And that's a conversation that will be ongoing when we get into land reform and stuff like that. But there's an opportunity here that shouldn't be missed by the people who are living and working in the countryside. That this has the potential to create a lot more jobs, with diversification away from the vagaries of farming, which we all know about. And there are positives out of this. And it also allows us to say, as a country that is absorbing our emissions, we're doing all the right things. We're restoring peat. We are planting trees. We're making sure we've got a resilient food industry. And it's not going to be easy. Don't get me wrong. This is all going to be tricky. And every time we introduce something, people are going to go up in the air because we've become very polarised and everything, because social media is this machine that allows stuff to get out there. So all of that is happening. But you can be absolutely rest assured that we're doing it with absolute right intentions, and we'll make mistakes along the way, but ultimately what we'll try and do is get it right for every single person who's living here in Scotland. Yeah.
No, Jim, I appreciate it. I don't know anything you wanted to
No, I think
add.
that's a lovely
I hijacked the last
sentiment.
20
Politics
minutes.
is
but
your gig.
I get excited.
I can step back.
Like, do you ever listen to it? Do you ever listen to the rest of politics?
Do I listen to the rest of this politics?
Aye,
I do,
listen to it?
yes.
Aye,
I do,
aye.
yes.
It's quite good.
Do you listen to Holyrood Sources?
No, is that
You want to get into Holyrood Sources? You want
Right,
a real
okay.
insight into Scottish politics? Jeff Aberdeen...
a podcast, I take it?
Eh?
It's a podcast.
Podcast,
yeah.
aye.
You're
aye,
always looking for new podcasts.
And Andy McKeever, Jeff Aberdeen, and Callum MacDonald.
Right.
Those three, and they get some real good. If you want to listen to politics on a Scottish
no,
basis,
yeah.
look at listen to the Holyrood Sources. They guys are brilliant.
Because I'm in Restless Politics, and Ed Balls and George Osborne do another one as well, which is a different dynamic because they were more at the front line than the other two, although Alistair Campbell had all the strings. Anyway, on that note, Jim, thanks very much for coming
Listen,
in.
been brilliant to see you
Thank
guys.
you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much for having
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you.
And we're done. What about those bloody trees? Jim, great sport, great for him to come down. Pretty big time. I mean, he gets because he is,
Driver?
he had a driver, nice car.
Nice car.
He'd an aide as well, with him as well, that keeps his diary and all that. Like, he is pretty rushed. Like, from here, he had to go to do another heap of things, and it's all strict diary. So thanks to Jim and his team for slotting us in.
Yeah, I know.
Because didn't really have to. I mean, although we have a fantastic following, it's not like talking to BBC Scotland or anything like that,
Yeah.
So good on him. I think he came across well.
So do I. I think it seemed really open, and
He's just not. He just doesn't have the arrogance that a lot of them have.
no, and I like the
He
fact.
seems like a normal guy.
See, and with the fact he was saying he was never into politics. As you know what I mean, but he obviously did grow up in a politics heavy household, but he himself didn't really have an interest in it.
Yeah, and I was saying to him off camera, I fancy it someday, but I just don't like the fact that people dislike you. I don't take well to that.
No, you wouldn't.
If I get a negative comment, it crushes my soul for a minute. It's terrible, isn't it?
No,
You wouldn't think I'd be so soft-skinned.
yeah, you would.
You think I'm soft-skinned?
Yeah.
Do you know what my thing is? I think I have this desperate need to be liked.
Well, let's delve into that. I wonder why.
Yeah, I don't know. My joy comes from making people laugh and having people being happy. I know that sounds pure cheesy, but I get a pure buzz out of it. See, you make somebody laugh and you tell a joke.
Yeah, it's a win.
Oh, it's like a pure buzz. It is.
Not with me though, because I laugh at everything. Do you know what I mean? You want somebody who you actually have to work for a laugh.
Yeah, exactly. Just as long as everybody's happy, I'm happy. As the crux of it. But yeah, thanks to Jim. Farming's a tricky one. I did a talk at the Scottish Parliament building. Actually, Jim was there, and the crux of my thing was, compared to a lot of places in the world, it's not that bad now here in Scotland.
Yeah.
But don't get complacent on it. And don't muck it up, was what I said. It's nowhere's the whole world seems like an absolute shambles just now. We have our issues. Planting trees and productive land is one, although that seems to have slowed down a bit. What's happening with the subsidies is another big one that terrifies people. And some clarity is what people want. But on the whole, lamb prices, beef prices, okay, the arable wheat side of things is a bit shaky at the moment. Milk prices, they're stable just now. They're okay. Don't ruin it. Is all I was saying to them. So, with that positive thought, Or we'll all have to do podcasts and YouTube videos to get by. Thanks again. Yeah, thanks to Jim and his team for coming in. Absolutely fantastic. Anything else you want to add, Iona, before we wrap up this week?
Nope.
I'm obviously in America, as we said at the
I
start.
know, a week apiece.
Yeah.
That'll be nice for me. Wonder what I'll be doing right now.
And you won't even be in the office right now.
No, I won't.
Yeah.
Tuesday,
just a week off.
chill out. Week off, yeah.
Nice. Just what to do is take some photos around the office just now. And then check in periodically. Go, busy day here, boss.
Yeah.
And just
Non-stop.
yeah, flat out.
Jeez.
Yeah, when actually you're not even here. Yeah, I like
It'll be nice. It'll be really nice.
Okay. Well,
Maybe I'll record a few podcasts without you.
Steady. I'm
joking.
I'll do the jokes. Anyway, that's us for this one, folks. Thanks again to our sponsors, Crystalyx and Animax Tracesure. Wouldn't be happening. It genuinely wouldn't be happening without them. I've been Cammy.
I've been Iona.
And we're both fed by farmers.